News when you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Ed Kalegi. Billionaire retail tycoon Leslie Wexner told a U.S. House panel Wednesday that he visited disgraced financier Jeffrey Epstein's private Caribbean island, but said he wasn't aware of Epstein's sex trafficking operation at the time. Wexner said he visited the island once with his wife and children for a few hours while the family was in the area on their boat. This according to an opening statement Wexner made in a deposition to congressional investigators that was provided to Bloomberg News by his attorney. The House Oversight Committee has been investigating what role Epstein's broad network of connections may have played in facilitating his enterprise or delaying criminal prosecution. Both the U.S. and Iran reported progress following the latest round of nuclear talks in Geneva. Golnar Motovali is head of Iran coverage for Bloomberg News.
Both of them have sounded cautiously optimistic, which is kind of similar to how they were after the first round of talks. And this sort of general positive mood music suggests that they are planning to meet again. And in fact, the Iranian foreign minister did say that that there will be a third round of talks on the table. We just don't know when that's going to be and what the date for that is.
Bloomberg's Golnar Motovali. Iran, meanwhile, said it reached a general agreement with the Trump administration on the basis of a potential nuclear deal. The U.S. economy is creating plenty of wealth. It's just not creating many jobs. Forecasters expect Friday's report on gross domestic product to show the economy expanded 2.7% in 2025, a solid pace by any standard for a developed country. But employment barely grew, and the combination is drawing comparisons to the infamous jobless recovery of the early 2000s that followed the tech bubble and collapse. There's one major difference between then and now that makes the current divergence all the more unusual. The 2000s episode kicked off with a recession. This time, the jobless boom is happening without one. That marks a first in the post-war era. Christine Lagarde may be eyeing the exits at the European Central Bank before her term as president expires in October of next year. The Financial Times reports Lagarde could leave as soon as April 2027, ahead of the next French presidential election. Bloomberg's Alexander Weber has more.
We have three terms of ECB board members expiring next year, and it's always a very delicate process to appoint new personnel to this six-member group because all the big member states want to have their presence, and that makes for very complicated discussions.
Bloomberg's Alexander Weber reports an early exit for Lagarde could give an edge to the established frontrunners for the job, namely former Dutch central bank chief Klaas Knot and Spain's Pablo Hernández de Cos, who currently leads the Bank for International Settlements. The Wall Street Journal reports that according to U.S. officials, a major U.S. arms sales package for Taiwan is in limbo following pressure from Chinese leader Xi Jinping and concerns among some in the Trump administration that greenlighting the weapons deal would derail President Trump's coming visit to Beijing. In a phone call earlier this month with Trump, Xi urged caution on U.S. arms sales to Taiwan, the democratic self-governing island that China claims as part of its territory. Trump wants to avoid antagonizing China ahead of his visit, set for the first week of April. A second day of U.S. brokered meetings between Russia and Ukraine in Geneva broke up after nearly 90 minutes today. As Bloomberg's Tony Halpin reports, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is accusing Moscow of attempting to prolong the process.
Zelensky said that Tuesday's talks were difficult, and he's basically accused the Russians of dragging out the negotiations. The leader of the Russian delegation came out and spoke briefly to press, saying that they had long talks yesterday and a couple of hours today, and they'll go back and now report on progress to President Putin.
Bloomberg's Tony Halpin reporting from Dubai. U.S. envoy Steve Witkoff says there was meaningful progress during yesterday's talks. He says both sides agreed to keep working toward a deal. National Economic Council Director Kevin Hassett said a study from the Federal Reserve Bank of New York showing U.S. companies bear most of the tariff burden is an embarrassment, and the people associated with it should be disciplined. Hassett spoke on CNBC.
Incomes are up way more than the cost of living, and that's the real wage gain that this silly Fed study neglects to mention.
Hassett said U.S. consumers will be made better off by tariffs. The paper published last week by the New York Fed found that nearly 90% of the economic burden from tariffs in 2025 was borne by U.S. companies and consumers. The New York Fed did not immediately respond to a request for comment. Nvidia shares are up as Meta Platforms says it's agreed to deploy millions of the AI chip giant's processor in the next few years. Bloomberg intelligence tech analyst Matthew Bloxham says this may be a bigger deal for Nvidia than for Meta.
Obviously, there is a huge amount of rivalry for Nvidia's market-leading AI accelerators. So the fact that Meta can demonstrate that it's got good access to that technology to develop its own business is a really important message for them to give.
Matthew Bloxham with Bloomberg Intelligence says Nvidia already gets about 9% of its revenue from Meta. Meta shares are down right now. Axios reports Marco Rubio has been holding secret talks with the grandson and caretaker of Cuba's aging de facto dictator Raul Castro, bypassing official Cuban government channels and putting unprecedented pressure on Havana's regime. Checking markets, the Dow is up 0.5%, Nasdaq up 1.2%, the S&P up 0.8%, the 10-year Treasury yield 4.07%, the 2-year 3.46%. That's news when you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Ed Kalegi. This is Bloomberg.